on this week's show, I wanted to continue my series on top fighters that wasn't actually announced a couple of weeks ago when I talked about who were the top 10, greatest fighters in the different weight classes for MMA. This week, I'm actually going to do it on the top 10 boxers of all time. Now, since boxing has so many dang divisions and titles, I'm just going to go with the top 10 boxers of all time. It strictly will be men. So my apologies to any of the women boxing fans out there, because there's many great ones on that. I might do another show on that one day. But this one will just be strictly men. And of course, from different divisions over boxing. Of course, let me kick off my number 10 boxer, which may come with some controversy for some, because I know right out of the gate that a lot of people are going to disagree and think that he should be either way higher on the list or maybe just not be on the list at all. And I understand, considering that at his peak, he was considered, and rightfully so, the baddest man on the planet, even though he did lose to Buster Douglas, and after that, career really wasn't the same. But when we start to talk about greatest of all time, look, I'm looking at the entire career and taking it into account as far as those peaks and valleys. And when we do that, Mike Tyson's career for me slots him number 10. His peak was just as good, or could be argued was better than anyone who ever boxed. And yes, I do know he just didn't sustain it for that long. There is also a case that in his prime, he didn't fight anyone of note. And when he stepped up in competition and boxed fighters like Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield, he got beaten pretty handily. Now, granted, I know that when we talk about rankings and stuff like that, I normally don't like to deal into, speculations and what ifs and anything like that. But I do believe that some of him really losing as badly as he did to those fighters was because of things that was going on in his life, which I believe that had, those things that had not happened, or he maybe had them under wraps, that maybe he either doesn't lose to him, or maybe he just doesn't lose as badly as he did to those, to Lennox Lewis or to Holyfield. Now, I don't actually have those guys ranked ahead of him, even though some could argue that they are. But Mike Tyson, my number 10 boxer of all time. Let me go to number 9 on my list. And the Gypsy King is one of the current heavyweight champions, and in my opinion is the best heavyweight of his generation. This also should answer the question for who I think will win a fight between him and Mike Tyson. But having said that, Tyson Fury has a great case for being the best pure boxer of anyone who has ever boxed. And once he got his problems under control, he has been unstoppable. His only close fight since coming back came from his first fight with Deontay Wilder, which ended in a draw. But then in the rematch, he completely outboxed him. Everyone that he has fought has been beaten easily. And I think for Fury, that speaks more to just how good he is versus how bad his competition is. Lately, he has been talking about, retiring while he's still on top. And I hope he doesn't, because if he can put together a couple more years of beating people down, I think he will have a strong case as the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, and maybe even the greatest boxer of all time. But for now, though, I'll just put him in my 9th slot here. Let's go to number 8 on my list, and the Marvelous One, also known as Marvin Hagler, was, in my opinion, one of the greatest middleweight boxers of all time. He was the undisputed champion of that division for 7 years and had 12 total title defenses in that span. Now, I know that a 7-year reign doesn't sound long, but considering who he beat during that span, he beat fighters like Alberto Duran, Tommy Hearns, Mustafa Hamshambo, to name a few, and most of them came by knockout. He had an overall record of 62 3-2, which is highly impressive, and much like Tyson Fury, he had all the tools of the trade. The 80s are known as the golden age of boxing, and one of those reasons was because Marvin Hagler was around back then. So he's my number 8 boxer on this list. Let's go to number 7 on my list. So for the young kids out there that might be listening and only know Manny Pacquiao for losing to Floyd Mayweather and then losing to some dude named Jeff and then finally Urdanis Ugas, you might think that Manny wasn't that good. But trust me when I tell you that Manny Pacquiao, before that and even after that, is one of the all-time greats. The thing I always appreciated about Manny is that he was willing to take on anyone no matter who they were, and even if it meant fighting them 3 times, which he did on a number of occasions, and one of those times though it did got him knocked out cold by Marquez. But hey, again, if you fight somebody 3 times, they might be able to get you at some point. So I didn't really hold that against early Manny though. Was getting folks up out of there by TKO, and the dude's hand speed and movement was unreal. Every very good or great boxer in his era he has fought and mostly beaten all of them, and next to the greatest of his generation in Floyd Mayweather, more on him in a little bit, Manny was that dude for his era, and he slots here on my list. Let's go to my number 6 boxer on my list, and outside of him being an all-time great boxer, he has, in my opinion, the greatest nickname in fighting history in the Hitman. And Tommy Hearns gave us some of the best boxing matches of all time, and for his era, you can make the case that along with him, Sugar Ray, and the aforementioned Marvin Hagler, that he was the greatest. He won world titles in 5 weight classes, and during the 80s, again, gave us some of the most outstanding boxing matches in history. Heck, even the one that he actually lost to Marvin Hagler was a great fight, and that fight only lasted 3 rounds. Other than losing at the end of his career to some guy named Uriah Grant, the other losses on his resume are again to the best of that era in the aforementioned Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Iran Barkley, who didn't make my list, but the guy was also one of the greats for that era. So shout out to Iran Barkley. I know that some will question why I have him over Marvin, considering the one time they fought, Marvin beat him. And honestly, if you want to flip Tommy Hearns and Marvin Hagler, I'm not going to fight you for it. Honestly, this is just more of a personal choice since I just like the styles of Hearns better. Out of his 67 total fights, he knocked out 48 of his opponents, which is why he had the nickname the Hitman. Before anyone starts thinking that he was just a much earlier version of Deontay Wilder, that just was not the case, by the way. If you actually go back and watch his boxing match with Sugar Ray the second time, you can clearly see his boxing skills on display, which is why that one ended up in a draw instead of a loss like it had the first time. Even with my respect that I have for the Hitman though, he can't go into my top 5 because these 5 men coming up can easily all be argued for number 1. But they all can't be number 1. So let me go to who I have for number 5 on my list. And thinking about it, sitting around the barbershop or any, boxing conversation, and talking about, who's the greatest, the argument for Roy Jones Jr. always goes one of 2 ways. Either he didn't really fight anybody, since during the time he came up, there was nobody really to challenge him, or he was just so great that he made the other boxers look average at best. My opinion is that Roy was just that good. His overall record is 66-9, and 47 of them came by knockout. He was the undisputed light heavyweight champion, and in my opinion, the greatest that division has ever had. He also won the heavyweight championship, which is highly impressive considering Roy was not an overly heavy man. I mean, he only weighed, I think at his heaviest, 197 pounds. So to win a heavyweight title is pretty dang impressive. But for me, the most impressive thing is the fact that he won a gold medal in the Olympics. Okay, well, he should have won a gold medal, but he was robbed. He ended up getting silver, but he was robbed. He should have got gold because he pretty much ran through all of that competition in the Olympics. The reason why I have Roy here on the list and not higher is the fact that even though I believe he was just way better than the people he fought and just a man not in the right era to really be able to gauge how good Roy was, the boxers he fought won't come up on anybody's all-time list of great boxers. And Roy never had that one signature fight, versus like a rival. So it was hard for me to put Roy any higher on the list than fifth. If you eye test it, you can make the case, but again, looking at his resume, fifth is the highest I can get Roy. And I certainly couldn't put him over the man who's in fourth, which is the most hated man in boxing history, well, at least in my opinion. But regardless of what you think of Floyd Money Mayweather, he has an undeniable resume. He's undefeated in 49 fights. Yes, I know he's 50-0, but I'm sorry. I'm not going to give him that one versus Conor McGregor MMA fight. I'm sorry. I don't care if it was a boxing match and that Conor lasted more rounds than people thought. Sorry, Floyd, you're 49-0. Even with that, though, the other 49 people he fought were the best of his generation, and he beat them all. I know that most Floyd haters say that he ducked and dodged most boxers outside of the ring even better than he did inside the ring until he was ready to fight them or they were too old, which is kind of interesting considering Floyd was older than most of the opponents he fought. But anyway, no matter how it happened, when he fought them, he won. So with Floyd, we have to take it for what happened and just leave it at that. He was a 5-weight division champion and the best of his generation. He has the best defense of any boxer I have ever seen, which is why he has the lowest being hit rate of any boxer in history according to CompuBox stats. Even though Floyd wasn't known as a knockout artist, he still has a highly impressive hit rate as far as accuracy goes, which really actually helped keep people off of him. Trust me, I don't think you ask any of the boxers he fought, they got tired of getting hit by Floyd, which is why they stopped running up on him. As great as Floyd was, though, and some out there consider him the GOAT, he's just not better than these three boxers I actually have ahead of him. Let me go to number 3 on my list. So for anyone who has seen Floyd Mayweather box and think he's the GOAT because of his defensive prowess and speed, well, let me introduce you to a boxer who was not quite the defensive flight of Floyd was, but was really close. He was just as fast, if not faster, and had way more knockout power in his hands. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Sugar Ray Leonard. Now, Sugar Ray didn't have a lot of fights, with only 40 total, but he won 36 of those fights with a 62.5% knockout rate. At his height, he won fights against some of the greatest boxers in history like Alberto Duran, Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns, and even Floyd's daddy, Floyd Sr. And most of those fights were in the 10 total title defenses that he had in his tenure. Much like Floyd, he was a 5-division champion and was the lineal champ in 3 of those weight classes. Yes, I know that he had 3 losses and 1 draw, and 2 of those losses came against Hector Camacho and Alberto Duran, and both of those guys were again a part of the greatest generation of boxers in a lot of boxing aficionados' opinion. For any youngsters out there that didn't see Sugar Ray Leonard box, Just go YouTube some of the highlights and you will see what I'm talking about. There was a fight, and I can't remember who he boxed, where this dude was swinging at him. He got out the way so fast, he literally got behind the guy and tapped him on the shoulder so that way the guy would know where he was, because the guy was like, where did he go? I'm dead serious. Go look it up on YouTube. Sugar Ray Leonard was just that fast and that skilled. Dude was amazing. But can't get him any higher than third, because 1 and 2, one of them y'all's probably heard of, and the other one not so much. But I'm gonna help give y'all a little education on that person. But let me go to number 2 on my list. So I don't think that the number two person on my list, I don't think much has to be said about this man, considering he has probably the best case to be the GOAT, and most people have probably heard of him. I'm sure you have. I mean, he thought he was the greatest as much himself, and actually said it on a variety of different occasions. The great Muhammad Ali had a 56-5 record with a knockout rate of 60.6% in his fights. He has 2 of, if not the 2 greatest fights of all time in boxing history. One when he fought Joe Frazier in the Thriller in Manila, and then George Foreman, who he fought in the Rumble in the Jungle. For me, the thing that puts Ali here on the list, besides just being one of the all-time greats, is the fact that if you think about it, he actually had 2 careers, pre-war and post-war. Prior to the Vietnam War, though, he was the undisputed heavyweight champion and only lost it due to being drafted at the time and, of course, refusing to actually go to war. He was stripped of the title along with his boxing license, and he was arrested, since that was actually the punishment back then for what was called draft dodging. After about 4 years of not being able to compete, he came back and still had a great Hall of Fame career, and topped it off by winning back the heavyweight title against the aforementioned George Foreman. So for me, the fact that he had basically 2 Hall of Fame careers in the same boxing span is pretty impressive. It almost reminds me of Jordan. He had a Hall of Fame career prior to him leaving to play baseball. And then when he came back from playing baseball, he put together yet another Hall of Fame career. The thing that made Ali great was the fact that he was a heavyweight, as far as boxing skill goes, that moved around like a lightweight, which gave all of his opponents he fought fits. And plus he had an insanely high boxing IQ. As much as I love Ali, though, the boxer and the man for that matter, the guy having number 1 was just a little bit of a better boxer than even him. Now, many of you out there may know of one Sugar Ray, but this Sugar Ray was the best of the 2 Sugar Rays and the greatest boxer of all time, who's number 1 on my list. He has a staggering record of 174, 19, and 6, with 109 of them being by knockout. Who would I be talking about, ladies and gents? I am talking about Sugar Ray Robinson. In his day, he beat everyone that was the best at that time. And one time during his career, he had a 91 fight win streak, which is ridiculous. He held belts at almost every weight class outside of heavyweight, which he actually just flat out didn't compete in. I think if he would have competed in that, he would have won in that too. Most of his losses came via decision or at a later stage of his career. Now, for anybody who's Googling right now Sugar Ray Robinson, let me tell you, back when he fought and boxed back in the 1940s, I think it's safe to say, and everybody knows this now, there was huge racism and discrimination going on. So the fact that he was able to win as much as he did against that kind of heat is simply incredible. That might be why he came in thinking, I got to knock all these folks out, because if I don't, they may actually give me a loss just based on the fact that I'm black. There's not much footage of him actually in the ring to look up, but from the stats, when you look on CompuBox and then the little video footage that you can find of him boxing, he can not only knock people out, but he was also extremely fast for his size, and his defense was also second to none. Trust me when I tell you all, the dude was that great. And if you don't want to take my word for it, even Muhammad Ali thought he was the best he had ever seen. And that's coming from the man who called himself the greatest. And just by that alone, that's good enough for me. So Sugar Ray Robinson, my number one boxer in all of history.